There's outrage in India following an article published in the New York Times that claims that the sari is a symbol of Hindu nationalism. The writer conveniently forgets the sari, India's pride, has no religion. The attire has been draped by women cutting across religions through centuries, and also most weavers are Muslims. But take a look at these paragraphs from the article. Quote, since the Bharatiya Janata Party formed a national government in 2014, the Indian fashion industry has been pressed to aggressively promote traditional attire and bypass Western styles. The effort aligns with the party's broader political program to project multi-faith India, a country of more than 1.3 billion, as a Hindu nation. End quote. Another one says, quote, fashion and how Indians think of it has not been exempt. Mr. Modi has made the traditional dress a priority, and as many in the country want to please him, the fashion industry has followed along. End quote. The article goes on to say that, quote, Banarsi sari, the traditional garment known for its fine silk and opulent embroidery and primarily worn by Hindu women, end quote, carries on saying in India, fashion has become a nationalist cause. Asghar Qadri is a writer who's written this article for the New York Times. Meanwhile, angry reactions have been flooding Twitter, slamming the article. Sample these. Everyone wears the Banarsi sari at New York Times. This is incredibly biased writing. Another one says the Banarsi sari, the traditional garment known for its fine silk and opulent embroidery and primarily worn by Hindu women. That is, of course, that's been said by the article. Wearing the sari is communal. So, dear Indian ladies, if you want to be secular, wear jeans, skirts, minis, etc., as per the New York Times. So, a smorgasbord of reactions coming in to the New York Times articles. You can see some of those up on your screens right now, and how Indians at large have reacted to this attempt to sort of communalize and politicize the outfit, a sari, that's worn, like we pointed out in our report right now, across religious divides and, of course, cultures as well. And in fact, we filed a report on the New York Times that's imparted the world with some invaluable education on India. Take a look.
Asghar Qadri and Teresa Kuldova suggest that these are names of people who wouldn't know which end of a sari to tuck in first. And they certainly don't sound like Sanskrit-reading scholars of the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedas either. Yet, this writer and his interviewee inform us in the New York Times that India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has held a gun to the heads of his country's 650 million women. Wear a sari, or else I'll pull that trigger. In an asinine attempt to simulate the brilliance of ancient Greek mathematicians that would make poor Euclid toss in his grave, the writer's theorem is as follows. Mr. Modi is a Hindu nationalist. Hindus love cows. Hindus hate Muslims. He is promoting a type of silk sari because it is an Indian garment. India is Hindu, but Mr. Modi is allowing its weavers to die because they are Muslim. In case WION's viewers are scratching their heads, here's the conclusion. Hindus lynch beefeaters. Hindus kill critics of Mr. Modi. So, if you don't wear a sari, the same dark fate shall befall you. Quod erat demonstrandum, QED. Forget about the New York Times' claim of upholding the dignity of labour, especially for women. This male writer reminds us with an invisible snigger between the lines that the minister who is helping Mr. Modi promote Indian fabrics is, horror of horrors, a former television soap star. Here are some priceless excerpts. Indian women wear the sari because, quote, Mr. Modi has made traditional dress a priority and as many want to please him, the fashion industry has followed, unquote. The Indian fashion industry has been aggressively pressed to promote traditional attire and bypass Western styles, unquote. There's more flatulence. The writer quotes a few Indian designers selectively, but attempts to lend real weight to his idiocy by pulling in a person with an academic-sounding title, an anthropologist. Czech woman explains Indian sari. Quote, aesthetic production has an uncanny tendency to materialize ideological currents in any given society, unquote. Miss Kuldova has a resume that shows that the only silk she may have ever encountered is on the parachutes she used to drop into India a couple of times in the at least 5,000 years of the sari's history. But she may well be the expert also on the ideological currents she speaks of. In addition to India, her other specialty is, here it comes, biker subculture in Europe. The New York Times has for long had a penchant for neo-Orientalist nonsense on India. After all, when a daily's income depends on advertising by luxury brands, of course its writers must do all they can to further the success of those very brands on India's giant consumer market. So far, that's remained elusive. Indian shoppers travel widely and can buy the same abroad for lower prices. Western courtiers often sell their unsold stuff in India for horrendously inflated prices. But these are uncomfortable facts that get in the way of the writer's purpose. And if the chief intention of the unresearched article is to slam all the Hindus of India, whether they vote for Mr. Modi or not, then Laila Tayebji, India's biggest and most famous proponent of hand-woven saris and the founder of Dastakar, a cooperative whose benefits go to the weavers, is best left uninterviewed. Her biggest disadvantage? She's a Muslim. Padma Rao, WION.
Joining me this evening is François Gauthier. He's a French political writer and journalist based out of Pondicherry. Also with us from New Delhi is the fashion designer Dhruv Vaish. Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks very much for agreeing to speak with us on the whole 9 yards on the sari. Dhruv, to you first. Have you felt pressure to design or get your clients to wear saris since, let's say, 2014?
See, I'm into menswear mostly, but people was hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Hello. Yeah. So can you just repeat the question once?
I said, have you found some sort of change in? All right, let's try and get back to Dhruv in a second. I think he's having trouble hearing us. Let's go across to François Gauthier first. François, let me just ask you first of all for your reaction to this article from the New York Times. Was it riveting reading?
As a Westerner, I think that most Western newspapers have an unconscious superiority complex when it comes to India. It's something colonial that has survived. So you find that this type of article which are highly biased, and which demean Indian culture. The sari is such an ancient piece of cloth, so unique, which survived for 5,000 of years. If you look at the kimono, which is Japan's national dress, for women, it has not survived. Now it is a ceremonial dress. The sari is used everywhere in India, in Bombay, by the rich, in the poor villages of Tamil Nadu. It's an extraordinary piece, and an Indian should be proud of it. What's wrong in being proud, to dress in a sari or dress in a kurta? So the article is very biased, but the New York Times has shown since the last few years, that it's after Mr. Modi, it's after Hindus. It's a pity, that this article was not given to write at least to someone who's a Hindu. They had 800 million Hindus in India, 1 billion in the world. At least instead of giving it to someone called Askar Kadri, could have been given to a Hindu to write, so they can defend themselves. What a biased piece of article. I'm so surprised.
But do you think there's also a degree of irresponsibility on the part of the New York Times to even publish something that I can only describe as drivel? I mean, there's really not much reporting that's gone on in writing it. In fact, even the quotes that are put in the article, they're out of context. It's very difficult to understand what exactly the article is trying to arrive at.
Yeah, completely out of context. It's a lady. Is she a lady that Mrs. Quadri? Is she a lady from the New York Times? Anyway, she interviews, a Christian designer. She interviews, Muslims, weavers. She doesn't give any, any quote from Hindus, who can say something about the sari. It's totally wrong. I mean, the West has imposed the tie, wearing a tie, has been imposed by the West all over the world, and a Western newspaper comes and gives lesson to India, what to wear. This is totally outrageous, I mean, as a Westerner, as a journalist, I'm outraged by this article, It's not only biased, there is no proper reporting, there is no proper argument, doesn't give, the possibility to Hindus to defend the saris, it's totally biased. I mean, it's very, very wrong, and I'm surprised the New York Times.
Allow me to comment. Do you think that the whole premise of even calling the sari a piece of Hindu, fashion or a sartorial choice chosen only by Hindus is misleading in itself? I mean, how do you explain then the sari being such a popular choice of dressing in Bangladesh, for instance, which is a Muslim majority country?
Absolutely. I mean, the sari, I remember interviewing Benazir Bhutto, she was dressed in a sari. Pakistan, is a Muslim country, but yet she was proudly dressed in a sari. The same is true of the last two presidents of Bangladesh. They're dressed in sari. It's such a simple and wonderful piece which has survived for so long. How can you associate Hindu nationalism, so-called Hindu nationalism, and such a beautiful and ancient and simple piece of clothing which has survived, whereas, we see that in many countries in the world, most dresses or, men dresses are not survived.
Right.
So it's very biased and very untrue and very unfair. And very sad, and as a Westerner, I'm appalled. I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed of.
Right.
Seeing,
Stay with me, Francois. Dhruv Vaish is back with us on the conversation. Dhruv, allow me a second. I'll get my question across to you just in a bit. Khushi Kabir, a cultural activist, is also joining us from Dhaka. Khushi, thanks very much for speaking with us. I just brought up Bangladesh, and I was just wondering what your reaction is to the New York Times article. Do you find that the sari is a symbol of Hindu nationalism?
Hello? Yeah. Hello?
Yes, Khushi,
Hello,
you
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I was asking if you're surprised by the tone and tenor of the New York Times article that seems to suggest that the sari is a Hindu nationalist symbol that's being pushed by the current dispensation.
I think it's people are getting mad absolutely in this and religion is going totally out of its limits and boundaries and what religion is actually meant for. How can sari or any attire be absolutely pushed into being a religious attire? People in Bangladesh wear saris. But people in India, a lot of people in India wear saris who are also not Hindus. There are a lot of Hindus in India who wear shalwar kameezes. So you can't just, or whatever,
right.
Whatever the dresses would be. In Assam, they would be wearing their nekla chador. So whatever it is, each area has their own attire. And to consider an attire as being religious, it's totally ridiculous, it's totally uncalled for, and I think it just shows the narrow-mindedness and the bigotry that people are trying to create in people's minds, and therefore create a divide and it's the same kind of thing that we see here when the religious minorities get affected or in any ways attacked because of all these wrong perceptions and wrong interpretations.
Fair enough. That's an important point you bring up, Khushi. Stay with me. Dhruv Vaish, who's a fashion designer based out of Delhi, is joining us on the conversation as well. Dhruv, I hope you can hear me this time around. I was just asking, in the fashion industry at large, you of course are a menswear designer, but I'm sure you hobnob with people who do fashion for women as well. Have you seen there being a trend that can be associated with the sari developing only around 2014 as this article suggests?
See, first of all, I think it's absolutely absurd to relate fashion, connect fashion and religion. I think fashion is something about breaking boundaries, and it's going beyond religion. So, where we talk about Mr. Modi supporting the Indian crafts and trying to bring the heritage back, it's got absolutely no relation with the sari being a Hindu. The idea is to bring our heritage clothing back. We have such beautiful heritage stuff in our country. So much, such rich textiles, embroideries, and all that. And it's beyond any religion. It's connecting it with religion is absolutely absurd. And yes, it's people are now very well aware of the Indian. It's people like wearing Indian fashion, but it's not got to do anything with any religious.
Sure.
Reasons.
All right, Francois, Khushi brought up an interesting point as well, saying that, this is something that's created a conversation or a debate perhaps where there was none to start with. I mean, who would have thought that you could associate the sari with something like a religious symbol? And I ask you, therefore, you mentioned the New York Times biased reporting in the past. Do you feel that this is once again an example of how clickbait writing is something that's becoming more trendy, and even a hallowed publication such as the New York Times could fall to its guile?
Can I add something?
Sure.
I'm married to an Indian. I'm fortunate to be married to an Indian for 30 years. She can wear a sari and wear jeans, the next in the evening. That's the beauty also of Indian women. The ability, to blend the ancient and the modern. Nobody's saying the sari should be worn all the time, but the capacity that Indian women have to wear, different types of clothing is wonderful. It should have been praised by the New York Times. It's extraordinary. It's unique in the world. And so is the sari, unique in the world. So it's a very biased article. It's a pity that the New York Times has written such a condescending article.
Okay, stay with me, all three of you. Just for our viewers who are joining in, it seems that the good old sari is no stranger to controversy. It has been called many things by many people, but to be branded Hindu is a first. As we pick apart the latest propaganda, here's a look at the sari's naughty social media record.
It rules the ramp, it ravishes the red carpet. It's classy, it's unwieldy. The sari inspires not just trends, but tweets too, sparking social media storms that go the whole 9 yards. Twitterati tied itself up in knots when Bollywood actress Raveena Tandon posted this. The reactions were quick and sharp, slamming Tandon for trying to gain publicity with provocative statements cut out of whole cloth. Sure enough, an apology followed. Another write-up listing reasons for not wearing saris to work got many worked up on a weekend recently. Sari, not sorry, they shot back. Leading the sari brigade is the Union Textile Minister herself. Her I Wear Handloom hashtag was a rage, prompting many to post their pictures in support of the handloom industry. What's any of this got to do with Hindutva or nationalism, you would ask? Well, that makes two of us. Bureau Report, WION.
Francois Gauthier, if I can come back to you, you were of course mentioning the fact that, being married to an Indian woman, you can testify to how easy it is to go from wearing Western outfits to Indian outfits, basically based on your comfort level. Do you think that the New York Times, as it has in the past once apologized for a provocative cartoon that it had done, that it owes an apology following this article? And do you think that that apology is actually going to make it onto social media?
Yeah, I think the Indian government should step in and I mean, in China, I don't think the New York Times would have had the liberty to speak so unfairly, and strongly against the Chinese national dress or the Chinese culture. They do that. The New York Times do that because they know that they're getting away with it. That they're accusing Hindus, and they know that Hindus are the most lenient, tolerant people, and they usually take things down. So maybe the government should step in and ask, questions to the New York Times. This is a very unfair article, badly reported, and which is an attack on, on India's pride, on India's culture. There is no reason why we journalists should get away with saying things like that. I mean, it's the opposite of freedom. One misuses the freedom that is in India, that you can say anything. So I think New York Times should be taken to task.
Yeah, Dhruv, I want to just take that beyond what Francois just mentioned. I mean, even for, I would say, I think it would be a misnomer to say that just Hindus are offended by this article's premise. I think it's offensive to most Indians because of the line that's been adopted by the writer and, of course, the publication by extension. Dhruv, would you agree that that this article, it would be, doing it a favor by saying that it's insulting, but do you find it humorous in some ways for somebody to get away with writing something like this and have it published in one of the most well-read and most well-respected newspapers in the world?
Absolutely, I think it's very, very insulting for our country to, for such a newspaper to write such an article, and something has to be done about it. It's to because they should be writing about how well the Indian sari has done, how the designers have taken it forward and made it so modern, something so such a beautiful old heritage piece, and it's been turned around and keeping its old beauty and still it's modern. Instead of that, they are trying to make it into a political thing, which is terrible. And it's very sad to see that.
All right, we leave it at that, gentlemen. Thanks very much for joining us this evening, both Dhruv Vaish and Francois Gauthier, and also, of course, Khushi Kabir, who joined in from Dhaka. Appreciate you taking out the time to speak with us.